I'm now going to request my colleague, Yash Ranga, who's the Director for Innovation and Strategy at Ajay Govale, he's going to be leading a panel discussion. And Yash, can you please come in and please sit down, quite quickly introduce yourself and then your panel members, and then over to you, Yash.
Thank you, Shakti. And first of all, thank you all very much for being engaged with us on Friday evening. So I'll not be too much of a boring person between your evening gala and this last closing panel, because this is going to be a very, very interesting conversation of some of the champions. Economy. It sounds like a big word, but how does it look like on ground? How does it look like in community? So that's what we are going to be learning and hearing from some of the real champions on ground, and then getting to know more about their challenges and what they have been doing, and also what's been required next. How can we take this dialogue forward to the next dialogue, and what's the next step in this whole journey for us? So I would like to invite all my panelists with me to join me here. Sarika, can I have you on stage with me? Venkat, can you please join us? Can you please be with us, Ajay? Well, welcome everyone to this next set of conversation. After in our last two deliberation sets, we have to try to unlock the meaning of circular economy, how it looks like into the context of India, as we aim to do this through our first India Circularity Summit. And as we evolved into the summit, we learned more about how it is being perceived. One, how do its opportunities look like in India, and based on those opportunities and some conversations on different stakeholders involved into the maturing of this practice in the country. Now we would like to take transition after an interesting session on the role of capital, the role of finance in circular economy. But I think the best and the most important thing to get to is how it looks like on ground. What does it mean when we hear the term circular economy? So based on what I've been learning in all these days, what I felt is like it'll be easy for us to comprehend if we see circular economy at three levels. One, for sure, as Pixar Globals believe in large systemic changes, but there are large level changes that requires a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources, and a lot of failures. So in order for us to make it a little bit easy, I would really love to see circular economy at city level, because cities are the most important system that we live in on day-to-day basis. Most important, who lives in cities? Communities. People live in city. How does circular economy looks in the community level? And the third most important thing, when we talked about capital, when we talked about the movement of capital, how does circular economy stands in terms of the private sector corporations? Because ultimately they are the drivers that can trickle down to city level or to the community level. So first, how we'll take this panel out is I will let you to introduce yourselves. One, who you are, where you are coming from, and second, before entering to the core work, Royston, we are missing you. Before we enter into the core work that you guys do, I would really want to learn. I would really want to learn from you guys that what triggered in you as individual leaders to take this step into an unknown territory, which is still being under definition or under articulation, and you have dared to move into this space of creating people positive space, planet positive space, any term that we can add to it, but it's not an easy space to enter. So we'll start with you, Sarika. Can you please tell us about your journey? Because I'm really inspired by your journey from being an academician to an entrepreneur to a corporate person, and now engaging with communities in this transition.
Thank you so much, Yash, for this inviting me for this to this panel, and very happy to be amongst some amazing people here on the panel and off the panel, of course. So yeah, as you said, that this is my third career, and career for keeps. I'm really enjoying every day of my life as a development sector professional. Started my career as a professor after my PhD, and I started teaching operations and supply chain management, which is interestingly is being very useful to me in what I'm trying to do right now. You know, the tools that I learned and was teaching a couple of years ago, I'm practicing them, getting to practice them now. I got a chance to start my own IT business in 2001, and I quit being a professor and started an IT company, which I was running for 10 long years. During some point in time, I decided to provide an opportunity to the underprivileged in my business, and I realized the power of being an entrepreneur from being a job seeker to a job creator was immense, and I decided to use that opportunity, and that was like a watershed movement in my life, because I realized that what poor people really need is an opportunity. That's it. They have everything in them ultimately. And that kind of led me to sell my business and start Ra Foundation in 2011. We are about 10-year-old organization, but first 3 years just spent in self-incubation because I had no clue what I was going to do. And may sound very cliched, but just wanted to use my background and experience to change the world. But that's the story. And yeah, and Ra Foundation started working with the tribal communities into 2014. When we found our calling in the indigenous community, a chance visit, and we thought this is what we want to do, and we went with to create livelihoods for the tribals in their own villages, and failed miserably because we realized that there were too many impediments to livelihood, and we have to look at everything holistically and address de-layer the social problems which were extremely intertwined. And one after the other, we realized that the core root cause of all problems was something called water poverty, and that's how our water project started. So we, over a period of 7 to 8 years, we have created about 800 million liters rainwater harvesting capacity in 110 villages, benefiting over 50,000 people. Drinking water is available in their own villages, which is helping multiple stakeholders, like farmers have stopped migrating. They are doing full-time climate smart agriculture and being trained through our agriculture school, because we realized that these indigenous people were all forest produce gatherers, and they need training in agriculture, and especially they are in the line of fire of climate change. So it was very important to teach them the climate smart techniques, and then of course sustainable livelihood opportunities for women. And going forward, actually we realized that waste was while in cities it was in direct correlation with development. The more you develop, the more waste you produce. Unfortunately, our tribal communities were going deeper in poverty and deprivation, and yet waste was becoming a humongous problem. And over the last 1 or 2 years, we have been addressing waste at different levels, and maybe I can talk about it a little later. And otherwise, I've been a writer, speaker, and I'm enjoying my tenure as a development sector professional. Looking forward to doing a lot of work in circular economy.
Thank you. How about you, Ajay?
Well, I represent United Way Mumbai, and it's a non-profit organization. We are part of a global movement called United Way Worldwide, having its presence across 41 different countries, and there are 1,200 such United Ways. The ethos of United Way is to work in the local community to address local issues by facilitating collective community impact. And in my 15 years of association with United Way Mumbai, I being a development sector professional, we have been working on several issues, and one among them was cleanliness, environment in Mumbai city. And Mumbai being a shore coastal city, beach cleanups have always been closer to our heart, and the corporates that we would associate with would often enjoy working, would often find value in supporting beach cleanups. So starting with one-off beach cleanups, being happy and satisfied with the humongous quantity of waste we would collect, we thought we are doing our job. And over the years of almost after about 4 to 5 years, we realized when we were sitting back to determine what is the consolidated is the problem. We've lifted the waste from one place and handed it over to the municipality, not knowing what's happening with it. And we realized though we may not be able to address the issue at scale, let's at least try to showcase a model. So since 2018, we started working with the municipal corporation with support from different corporate partners. We have an initiative called Clean Shores, where we put our foot down. We told our corporate partners, sorry, if you are looking for a one-off cleanup, we are not the place to come to. Let's talk about adopting stretches of shores in Mumbai and try to address the issue of cleanliness from multiple aspects, multiple angles, how the public space requires to be addressed. And one among, I wouldn't talk about much other initiatives, what we do at the beaches, but one very important aspect that we are trying to do at the beaches is 95% of the waste that we find at the shoreline is non-degradable waste, which is plastic by and large. People often mistake that this waste is littered by the beach goers, the beach visitors. People visit Chowpatty, they eat bhel and they litter. But no, that's a big myth, because only about 5 to 10% of that waste would be contributed by them. But the remaining waste is something that I may have irresponsibly disposed while walking on the street. That has entered into the drain, that has come into the Miti, and then it has entered into the sea. And it has been washed ashore with the high tide. Every day during the high tide, there will be a new lot of waste that comes to the shore. And we have a saying, right? Darya kuch nahi rakhta apne pet mein. It throws back everything. That is a core issue. So we identified some of those rag pickers, we call them safai saathis, hired them into a mainstream. We are working with a few partner organizations like Sri Mukti Sangatna, Via Green. There are these organizations who are experts in addressing waste. So with their help, we've engaged safai saathis to be deployed at these beaches 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. And their core job is to pick up, which is what they are tuned to, their experts in, to pick up anything and everything that is non-degradable, irrespective of its value. The moment they collect it, this waste is embedded in sand, it is weight, therefore it is difficult to send it directly for processing. And that gap is what we are trying to address. At source, this waste is being cleaned, it is being dried up, it is being segregated, and then it is being sent to those recyclers for repurposing. So over the last 3 years or 4 years, and of course, assuming whatever deterrent COVID could cause to this work, we have till date managed to process or collect almost 7.5 lakh of waste, which otherwise would have gone into the landfills. So this waste has been collected, cleaned, segregated, and sent for recycling. So that is the value we are trying to showcase to the municipality also, that this is a model possible. Let us try to make this at scale.
Absolutely. I would really like to ask a follow-up on this, because a very important aspect that limits our transition in circularity is this whole idea of externalization. Because what we want is, we want something to be that we can't manage, we want to outsource this to somebody else. And in this case of waste management, what is happening is, like we want our beaches or our neighborhoods or our offices to be clean, we get it collected as a part of real champions of, practicing circularity, but ultimately we don't know where it's going to end, and ultimately if it's adding to the landfill, then again, we are creating a mess somewhere else, which is even a bigger mess than while it was with at our hands. So what you guys have done is an interesting way to look at both the downlink and uplink side of the waste, but again, it still limits results as a waste. Have you guys been thinking more forward for how do you, look at this waste and think of ways to create some wealth from this waste for communities and also create jobs for them?
Yes, certainly. So while this problem that we are addressing, the contributors are still staying far off and they are not sensitized. So to do that, what we've also been trying to do is create value at this shore. Today, for people who look at beaches as a place for recreation, all what our city has left is sand, water, and it's left to its destiny. These places are not really maintained or upkept as places of recreation. So with whatever is available, we are trying to encourage people to visit these beaches, do a shore walk with us. And we explain to them, this is not just sand and salty water. There is an entire ecosystem that lies in here, and learn and try to get associated with those species and then start respecting. Now, this is not just a sand and water place, but it is an entire ecosystem that you must respect. Secondly, so just one nice example, Chimbai is one of the beaches mostly unheard of, people may have not even heard of. In 2015, there was some study done by a non-profit organization which found Chimbai to be the dirtiest of the beaches in Mumbai. This beach has a habitat of fishermen which is over 300 years. So it has a lot of culture added to it. We took help of a few experts and did a survey, and we found this beautiful list of species of flora, fauna that were lying on this rocky, so-called dirtiest beach. We found a massive, large octopus on this beach while doing this survey. Would you imagine, would you have seen this at Girgaon Chowpatty? Would you have seen this at Dadar Chowpatty? And we thought this was important for us to document, and we've created a nice coastal biodiversity field guide of Chimbai Beach. This is what we are trying to create to build value for people. The moment people see there is value in this ecosystem, they will start respecting, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to you, Venkat. Venkat, we don't have you in frame properly, so for the benefit of our, So, Venkat, I would really be interested to first get a personal inspiration in terms of what inspired you to enter into the space of circular economy. Because I'm sure, as one of your colleagues said, that this is not a good paying space, so you would not come before just the sake of it. But what really inspired you to be a leader, a champion in this space?
First of all, thank you for having us, and welcome to the office again. Well, it's a long story. So I've been a corporate refugee, been in the regular 9-to-5 corporate job 11 years, 12 years back. I'm from a family in south of India, so the pressure from the family and the parents on who you are and what impact you make. So I carry my grandfather's name. So there's always a constant reminder as to what my grandfather did and what I'm doing in my regular corporate job. But that the lighter side aside, I think it was just one moment where it was, I don't know if I had any contribution to it, but I basically just looked at a line of work that could help me sleep better at night, to say it in simple words. And if I could make any small difference to an individual things in the world around me, that's where the journey started for me 11 years back, 10 years into my work. But yeah, it's been a long way. It's been a long way, but I think I'm still getting started. So I'm not sure if I would call myself a champion, but I think we're just getting started.
So with this starting, tell us about the starting point of action in this space.
I think it's so when I quit the corporate job, the only thing that I was very sure of is that I didn't want to do what I was doing. But I had absolutely no idea what sustainability was, or I had no idea about what circularity was at all. And all I wanted to do was reach out to people who were in the so-called space. So my first port of call on this is when I was based out of Shanghai, and I reached out to 3 Pakistani siblings who were running a social venture in the Shangri-La Mountains. And I said, look, I know how to do marketing, communications, and media. Can I come and help you out with your, telling your story in a slightly better way? And in return, can you help me understand how you do your business? And their very simple concept was they were using sustainable coffee grown in the Shangri-La Mountains to create different products. And all their proceeds, or 90 to 95% of the proceeds, used to go back in developing the local community, which are part of the coffee ecosystem in Shangri-La Mountains. And that took me on a journey of about 6 months of backpacking across Southeast Asia and Europe, trying to forced myself into conversations and doing just small roles with entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs doing similar work, and just learning the ropes from them. And along the way, I was just, I think, very fortunate to come across folks and people who are doing work in the larger context of things, like Avishkar, 3 years back now. And here I am.
Can you share a bit more about circular innovation apparel factory?
Right. So I think Anurag was mentioning about this earlier. There's a lot of work that's been done over the last 18, 20 years across the Avishkar group. And Intellecap, which has largely been doing very credible work in building ecosystems. And ecosystems, when I say building ecosystems, it's about, we believe there are 4 things that we need to put together to help innovators in any form to make impact on the ground and do it at scale. How do we mobilize capital, knowledge, networks, and solutions? Because fundamentally, these are the 4 things that you need to put together for any kind of impact. And we've been working with a lot of the ecosystem players, but one of the big stakeholders that we realized back in 2017, and this is around recognizing that, for us to make any impact with the 2030 goals and backwards, everyone knows there's a significant gap in the developmental capital that's really available. And we recognize that while we can bridge that gap in some form or the other, the one set of stakeholders that are really crucial for us to bring into that mainstream narrative is the private sector. And this is around the same time where this whole narrative of how fashion is one of the most polluting sectors globally. India plays a very key part of the global value chains. And that's the beginning of, that's a premise on which CAIF was set up, with one clear purpose and a mandate, which is how do we use circularity as a lens to build or envision a low carbon fashion industry, but one that also creates jobs and better livelihoods for the folks that are employed. Just for example, in India alone, we are only second to agriculture in the number of people we employ across the value chain. So the first couple of years, we started with a razor focus on India. Today, we look at the global south. As the area in about a month's time, and Africa and Southeast Asia as well as we go along. We fundamentally focus on two vision pillars, as we call it. First is how do we decarbonize the entire value chain using circular economy as a lens. Second is how do we build the ecosystem that helps us get to zero leakage of waste to the environment. And there we look at textile waste, we look at plastics, which is a significant component in the textiles value chain. And the third one, where in the true circular economy sense, we look at the waste from agriculture, food, forestry, potentially that could become an input into the textile industry. So for example, this banana pseudo stems after the banana fruit is harvested has the potential to become banana-based fibers. So how do you build that entire value chain? Similarly, there are 10, 12, 13 other waste streams from agriculture or food or forestry where it can become natural fibers. There can be a feedstock of natural fibers as an alternative to existing raw materials. So we look at those three waste streams. And the one thing that kind of ties everything together is while we are delivering planet positive outcomes, they could be in terms of resource efficiency, energy usage, water usage, looping the material back into the process, shift to renewable energy sources. Any of these planet positive dimensions, at the same time, how do we create jobs? How do we create better livelihoods? So the last point, and I'll take a pause after this, is for us, it's always been future backwards, which means we imagine what this circular economy would look like in the future. And we, of course, we recognize that circular economy represents, so when you look at the larger pie of greenhouse gas emissions, apart from the shift to renewable energy sources, all those from a conventional climate action point of view, circular economy represents the opportunity to bridge half of that GHG emissions from an industry standpoint. At the same time, if you imagine a future where circular economy is mainstream, a lot of the jobs that will exist in the future, those skills and capabilities and capacities do not exist today. So we are already investing from an industry standpoint, from a geography standpoint. We are trying to invest in what are the skills that are required within the workers in the garment industry or the textile industry or the fashion industry, and how they can be upskilled or reskilled and be provided with capital or knowledge or networks or solutions so that they have gainful employment in the future. Right. So for us, that's the essence of circularity that we are looking to enable, to catalyze as an ecosystem. And I'll take a pause here.
No, I think that's one of the most fundamental interventions for a holistic approach, because ultimately you have to look from the point where you start, but also from the point where it can lead back to.
Yeah.
And in that fact, the whole idea around the livelihood opportunities for future, to keep that in mind is incredibly important. I'll come back to you, Sarika. You work on ground creating biodiversity conservation, integrating it with water safety for the communities that you are part of, who are the innocent victims of the whole climate change process that is happening around. Can you share us like one or two major developments that you have taken towards integrating these efforts at the community level? And then what are the key challenges, and to resolve those challenges, or maybe to advance further in those challenges, what are the things that you require for that journey?
Yeah, sure. So, we work with some of the poorest people in the world. Literally, indigenous people are absolutely some of the poorest in the world. So clearly our starting point always has to be income generation, and locally without them having to migrate, and doing it in the most sustainable manner. That has always been the key priority and always the starting point. And when we start at that, how can any initiative give income? The first thing is, what are the livelihood opportunities available? So land, clearly converting the barren land into a lush green ecosystem, which can then not only bring in income, but rejuvenate the biodiversity, improve the soil quality, etc., became the next possible opportunity that we saw. And clearly for that, water was a very, very important ingredient, because having enough water to give to the plants and also to continue the revival process, rejuvenation process was very, very critical for us. So in that sense, we have managed to integrate. Water becomes our starting point. The next becomes the food forest initiative or the agroforestry. So there are multiple routes that we are taking to create income generation through agriculture, through food forest, through biodiversity rejuvenation. And so depending on the land size, depending on the land parcel, depending on who owns the land, depending on how much water is available. So there are multiple challenges exist in terms of, the contours of land. So we work in the northern Sahyadri Ghats, northern western Ghats, and the land is not flat. There are hardly any flat land available. Hydrogeology is very, very challenging. And we are constantly oscillating between humongous rains during monsoon to massive water scarcity the moment monsoons get over. So these are multiple challenges that we continue to face, and then creating a way forward out of this and looking at creating those income generation opportunities by creating biodiversity, by working on rejuvenating, converting barren lands into carbon sinks and stuff like that. So we have created our own model called food forest. Now, food forest is basically a 7-layer forest, and every layer gives income to the farmer, and every layer actually gives income at different points in time. The highest, the tall trees start giving income only after 4 to 5 years, but the first layer starts giving income within 3 to 4 months. So the farmer is constantly engaged, and farmer continuously earns money from that, and that's a one way of kind of continuing the process and without hampering the whole process. And then while doing that, we also realized that cattle food was a problem, because cattle was constantly coming and destroying the crops, and we had to compound, and putting a compound or putting a fence was not the solution. creating an alternative cattle feed which was nutritious really was the solution. So then we started working on that. So as we started going forward in our implementation journey, we started facing new challenges, multiple, further more obstacles. And then we reached out to people, we kind of figured out what are the best practices, created our own innovative solutions, used a lot of indigenous wisdom because we realized that there's so much wisdom in our own communities. Why are we even going out, asking for solutions? There are lots of homegrown solutions which we have modified, which we have customized, used a little bit of technology and implemented that. So lots of these solutions have been homegrown and community is completely involved in everything. Waste is another huge challenge which we are working on, and multiple types of waste. When we did a mapping of waste within the community, we realized that while wasted land was definitely wasted land and wasted soil was definitely one of the key types of waste that we defined. But single-use plastic waste was a humongous challenge, and wrappers. I was so happy to hear that now we have a solution for wrapper recycling. So till then, we then created a model where we have about 50 odd women who are collecting these single-use plastic bags, washing them and creating bags using looms, etc., creating beautiful products out of this single-use plastic and putting them back into circulation. So similarly, then there are other challenges that we continue facing, like plastic waste which are at the end of life cycle. We don't know what to do with it. We are still searching for solutions. And then the human waste is another major problem that our communities continue to face because open defecation continues to be a challenge. So again, convincing community to really convert that waste into something useful is we are working on that process, awareness, and then multiple challenges on that front. Then there is another challenge of non-degradable finite material, which like farming equipment tools, which at the end of life cycle, we don't know what to do with it. So, so that is maybe remanufacture, repurpose, reuse, repair, and put it back into circulation. So we are looking at some innovative solutions, like, for example, creating a tool library. We are working on that why should every household own a tool? Not required, right? So we are actually working on this concept of a tool library within every community where we'll identify certain tools and people will just use it as they want, and which includes a lot of plastic tools as well. So there are like multiple, as I mentioned that, as we started our journey, every milestone, there was like multiple challenges. So overcome each one at a time and move forward. Yeah, but it's an interesting process. And the good thing is that we have been able to create income opportunities for communities at every single layer, which is what has brought in enormous buy-in from the community, and trust building has happened within the community, which has kind of further accelerated our whole overall project implementation process.
So with this integrated approach that you are taking, and again, with this approach comes their kind of challenges with it. But have you ever thought of putting it all together while you are doing it, and imagining a zero waste community in the area where you work? Zero waste community can be the first pilot model for the country to get replicated, because one, you are looking at from across the spectrum, from waste to food to livelihoods to other income generating opportunities, and how do you maximize the use of the existing resources that there are in that process. So where do you think your role as a practitioner to take this to this next level and create a successful case of zero waste community?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned that, when we actually did a waste mapping, we saw 6 different types of waste that the community is generating on a day-to-day basis, which starts with organic waste, which actually can be easily composted and created, a green manure can be created. So what we have done is, the moment we saw that, we thought this is an opportunity, and we have early last year, we facilitated 10 women to start a composting business, and they actually collect the entire organic waste lying everywhere, which includes agricultural waste also, and they convert that into compost and they sell green manure very successfully. The second type, single-use plastic, which I mentioned, so which we have also created this opportunity for women where they upcycle it and create products. Third is, I have mentioned about the end of life cycle products. Fourth is this finite products. Fifth was human waste, which we are working on. And the sixth is this biodiversity of organic waste conversion was implemented at one village. Plastic waste was at some other village. The third, creating natural capital was at a third location. So yes, I mean, I personally felt that we are 50% problems. We already have the solution. For the 50% different types of waste that we see in the community, we are looking for solutions. But it is definitely possible to implement everything in one community. If say a couple of villages, if you define that as a cluster, and then create that zero waste cluster, and where nothing goes out and everything really moves back and into circulation and stuff like that. That opportunity is definitely there. We are moving towards that, and it will be wonderful to engage other stakeholders, learn from them, and as I mentioned that there are multiple challenges, and we know we can overcome those challenges, and we can discuss them. Definitely, we need to discuss that at such forums. But yes, I completely agree with you. We definitely want to implement this zero waste community project, and we are happy to do that.
Ajay, I would like to move towards you, and I've read across a very interesting article on United Way Mumbai's approach of Mumbai 360 degree, and it was very fascinating for me to hear or read something about the scale of a city like Mumbai, and that too from a lens of 360 degrees. So I really want to learn more of how you guys are envisioning it, where you are in the process, and what are the next steps that you guys think would lead to the actualization of the envisaged Mumbai 360 degree?
Mumbai 360 is a vision for us where we are trying to create a urban community development model, which is holistic and with the help of multiple stakeholders that work in it. And on a pilot basis, we've taken one of the 227 councillor wards of Mumbai. We've adopted that. We are working on, of course, again, this entire program, we had carried out a detailed need assessment into the community. By the time we went to hit with our interventions, COVID came. All the priorities changed. And we worked on COVID response. Currently, our teams are working on bridging the education gap that children are facing. And there is another intervention that is trying to address government scheme linkage. But when we say Mumbai 360 degree, it is not going to wait at this. But these are naturally in any given community, like Sarika highlighted, you have to show value. And that is when the community starts accepting you, community starts working with you. These are our entry point interventions. Subsequently, we would want to work with the community to encourage them to take charge of their waste management, to create a community-based waste management model, to work on access to health, let the community take charge and work on it. So that is the model of Mumbai 360, where we try to address all the community issues with the help of resources available in the community.
Venkat, from the whole concept, what you just shared about CAF and the ecosystem building, and again linking it with this Mumbai 360 degree, because as we look at a city like Mumbai, there are not only one industry like apparel, textile, there are several industries that are interlinked. And again, the limitations of not being in a proper circular approach is the broken supply chains that we have, or the supply chain inefficiency have in different industries. But ultimately, the whole value chain encompasses of the same elements of each and every industry as an input for another one. So have you thought, or have you been thinking around integrating it from what you have learned in the textile industry or apparel industry in India, and then probably taking it to a next level to maybe another industry, and then trying to bring that ecosystem even more deeper with different stakeholders, with different industry kind of thing? And it sounds like super complex to me even while I'm asking to you, but because you mentioned about the systemic approach of building this ecosystem, what do you think?
No, absolutely. I think it just starts with a very basic realization that no industry or sector operates on its own or doesn't operate in a silo, right? So you would imagine, if you think of these as a set of concentric circles, you have organizations. So all the work that we do is at two levels. One is we're building the ecosystem that makes it easier for organizations to participate in a circular economy. So an example is we're building the entire circular textile waste model, where we're starting with so we've taken both the top-down and bottom-up approach. We said, how do we make it easier for brands, manufacturers, startups to responsibly manage their waste, manufacturing or post-consumer waste? So we're building capacities and capabilities amongst waste workers, anywhere an estimated 1.5 million to 5 million waste pickers within India. We're converting them into, or we're evolving them into green micro entrepreneurs who are going to set up hyper-local waste collection, textile waste collection and segregation centers. So the idea is not just creating them, but how do you enable them and make it easier for them to sustain themselves? So on the back end, we are connecting them to manufacturing facilities so that they get access to threshold quantities of waste. They were connecting them to, or working with organizations who have access to residential communities or end consumer households to collect post-consumer waste. Once they collect and segregate, we connect them to startups who use secondhand waste to create other products, or we're converting them to communities like the Wagri community so that they can be refurbished and resold as a business model. So there's a monetization with reselling refurbished clothes. The third aspect is a chunk of the waste that can be recycled, so the material comes back in the loop. So we are creating that entire circular textile waste model for India, replicating the same thing in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, we've taken on the mandate with a large policy actor in Europe and a large European brand. We're building the entire end-to-end value chain for blended textile waste, collection, segregation to recycling, and for plastic PET to become recycled polyester. Everything for us starts with asking two questions. We're saying, if what we are doing, or does what we are doing make it easier for, does it make circularity within reach for the stakeholders? And second is going back to that point of what's in it for me. Is there a way that you can de-risk their participation in circularity? Yeah. So the case in point is, it's not just our ambitious vision of creating grassroots micro entrepreneurs from the waste workers. The question is, do they want to be part of that? Right. So there's a balance that needs to be made when we're trying to formalize an informal sector. There's an unintended consequence that might potentially happen. So you got to keep that in mind. So working with brands on the other side, where we're saying, let's not talk about doing small pilots. Let's start with what your 2030 goals are, whichever way you articulate. And then we can say, now that we are here, how do we help you get there? So in terms of getting access to FSC certified bamboo or sustainable natural fibers, is that entire value chain exists? Or you have a certain amount of waste and you want to make sure that you are able to replace virgin raw material with recycled raw material, whatever those challenges might be. So we work with them on a 10-year roadmap, small steps and intermediary milestones, but we're taking the long-term view and we're imagining future backwards. What we believe is key is, if you really look at, so we've evolved from a stage where we're saying we work with organizations and then look at the slightly larger aspect, which is textile clusters. We've got 4 or 5 large textile clusters, which is a group of large manufacturing units. That's the other level that you can operate. Then we've recently started having conversations, or there's interest where, because India now has a 2017 target for the first time, we know of a lot of state level authorities and city level authorities who have expressed interest on saying how they can become a circular economy as a city or as a state, as part of helping India achieve its NDCs, right? Because the target has not been set. It may be a little further out, 2070, but suddenly you've got a lot of, there's a lot of interest and intent from a lot of stakeholders, private sector, public sector, policy actors, civil society organizations who are saying, hey, now how do we create that roadmap? Yeah. Or how do we first get a sense of where we are, right? we know where we want to go, but do we know from a quantifiable measure where we are? But you're absolutely right. There is now a significant, there's an increased appetite for circular zero waste cities. So we are in conversations with a few stakeholders where we're putting together a framework of what zero waste cities or circular cities could look like. And I think it started with a very, I'll pause after this point, is we started with, I think, the conversation that we were having yesterday or the day before as well, which is the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy, right? Which is for the Indian audiences, you will relate to it. So we call it roti, kapda, and makan, right? So if you think of the three fundamental value chains: food, the clothes we wear, and the houses we live. So the food value chain, everything from restaurants to the farm to plate value chain, the built environment, and the clothes we wear. You address the three biggest waste streams.
Yeah.
I'm going to include plastic within that as well, because plastic is a big component of textiles. It's also part of the food value chain. It's also part of the built environment in some way. The only thing that's probably left out is e-waste.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a lot of solutions out there. All you need to do is, for an ecosystem enabler, ecosystem builder, or a bunch of folks like us who believe there is the future is shared and the problem is shared. It's not for one individual or one organization to solve for, and which is actually a pipe dream. One organization wants to do it all by themselves. But how do you connect the dots? Right? So you take what we call as a combination of design thinking and system thinking view.
Yeah.
Right? If you see people who are able to make any difference, they're not looking at a different set of information. All of us are looking at the same set of information. We have access to the same data or information. It's just how we connect the dots that makes a difference. Right? And it just takes very clear intent saying, I know I'm not. There's so many infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, as we encounter almost every day, saying, hey, why are you doing this? We already do it. There's so many things to be done. It's ridiculous when you think of competition. It's about complementarity. And everyone can coexist pretty well, actually.
Yeah. So I'll not conclude this session now, but we'll take some time to take some questions before we wrap up this conversation, because we've got a 360-degree view of different aspects of circular economy elements. So if there are any questions in the chat box or in the audience here.
For this one or two questions. Maybe can I pose a question? Yeah, Shilpa, you go first. So very much. I think each of you in your own very different ways has, you firstly share your journey, and you also share how you're really attacking this problem of the environmental and ecological challenges of our time. Right. So one of the objectives of the summit was, and of this panel, how can we really come together to have a concerted, to have our action as being very concerted, everyone acting in concert. And I realized from all of these discussions that circular economy has to only work on a decentralized basis. You can't have one big massive, big daddy looking at circularity and dictating. It has to do from within an individual, from within every organization. But can you just share, your experience, if this is a question for any one of you, about how do we really bring about this concerted action, and put this storytelling feature in this, because we're trying to create mass awareness, but it also is a very decentralized way of having to deal with this problem. So how does one really, the work that you're doing, how does one really amplify How does one really get cross-pollinate? How does one really, Venkat, you, Sarika, Ajay, for all the great work that you're doing? How do we just kind of sort of amplify this work? And how do we make it spread to get a critical mass out of it? Any thoughts? Yeah, that.
Yeah, so my requirements are very different from Ajay's requirements,
Okay.
very, very clear. So the journey that Ajay will take or Venkat will take or what we will take is going to be very, very different. So I think it will be very, very important while it needs a concerted effort, a centralized effort is required. You are absolutely right in saying that implementation has to be a little more decentralized and little more, where stakeholders working on similar problem in similar region with similar type of communities come together and then find their own journey together, map out their own journey and identify solutions together, something like that. So yeah, I think getting organizations, creating those verticals of say zero waste communities, organizations that are interested in implementing zero waste communities, zero waste cities, and the other, roti kapda makan. So, creating those zero waste roti kapda makan kind of verticals. I think it will be very important to get all the stakeholders together, engage them extremely well in a dialogue, which then leads to actionable agenda. So I think that is something which is required, and I'm glad that we are talking about it today. So this definitely looks like a very positive starting point.
But just to follow up on what you're saying, I think one output that I think would be of value really is that point. Can we really define what are the key verticals and then start focusing on each one? As of today, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm listening from an outside perspective, and it's all over the place. And I'm thinking, my gosh, how are we going to get this together? But I think if you really start honing on, and maybe just take it from where you people are starting. So maybe tribal communities.
Yes.
What are the issues in tribal communities? City. What are the issues in city? Corporate, certain specific sectors. Break those into verticals. Once you have a vertical, then you can start maybe scanning the universe for solutions.
Yes.
But as of now, it's one solution, like you said, is not going to fit everything.
Yeah.
So I think if that output can emerge, then I was thinking of you can have workshops, you can have conferences, you can have people coming, like pharma and everywhere else, coming and presenting their case studies, coming and presenting their innovations. You could have a marketplace kind of conference. Then a lot of it can start building. I think first you have to start focusing on vertical.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Anisha. Thank you, Sarika.
Please go. No, please.
So, like Sarika mentioned, there are different facets of this problem that we are all trying to address. And the created over the years is mammoth. There are those ocean gyres created with the floating plastic, which are massive. They are larger than countries in size. And that waste has to be addressed. That waste is out of our sight, and that waste needs to be addressed. How do we do that? Organizations like ours will always have a limitation of bandwidth. But probably what is required is innovation is the need of the hour. Innovative strategies, technology, and interventions to fill the gaps. We have found this solution to be working. We are trying to showcase this as a model at some places with the municipal corporation with us on in confidence. One of the beaches where we are working, I wanted to share this as a very good success story we take pride in, is that all these beaches in Mumbai have been given out for sweeping contracts. There are contractors appointed by the municipal corporation with the mandate that they have to ensure round the clock there is cleanliness maintained. And of course, there is also an expectation that when you say cleanliness or when you say waste being removed, there is waste management at the back end. But because of the sheer issues associated with it, the contractors are finding it difficult to deal with this as a waste management. So naturally, the displacement of waste is what is happening. But one of these contractors, he saw that this organization, while I may be transferring piles of sand and waste, from the beaches on a daily basis. I see this organization with their safai saathis, a small team of 3 safai saathis, 1 supervisor from the local community. They deal with 100 kgs a day, and they take pride in working on this waste, segregating this waste, sending this waste to recyclers. Why can't I do this? So in addition to those 30 sweepers that he had appointed, he deployed 3 more safai saathis to join hands with our team and began to take value from this waste. Now, this is exactly what we are hoping, that this gets that snowball effect. More and more stakeholders join. And the real victory is going to be when the municipality sees value in this. They are able to make this a reality on the ground as part of their mechanism to deal. So probably that is where this snowball effect is what will help address the problem.
One question from the audience is want to know more about textile waste value chain. Right. Upcycling, recycling initiatives, including local communities as livelihoods and income generation. Sham asked.
That's a very long response, Sham, but I can type in my email ID and we'd love to have a conversation. I think there are a lot of innovations on the recycling side. There are, of course, limitations to the recycling solutions that are available in this part of the world. I'm talking about South Asia. A lot of the more promising solutions are Europe-based, so we're looking at how we can get those solutions and make it more accessible to the industry or the value chain players in this part of the world. Like I said, we are investing in building the circular textile waste model. So think of it as a network of green micro entrepreneurs from the waste community themselves. We'll create those hyperlocal collection and segregation services. There's a fantastic initiative that H&M Foundation has been doing called Samohika Shakti. You probably have seen this. There's now a concept called social buttons, where the buttons that are collected from the waste by the waste pickers, now they're actually finding it a way to monetize. H&M, which is the business arm, they've actually placed an order for, if my numbers are, or if my memory is correct, they've placed an order for 18 million social buttons for which the waste pickers are going to get, compensated for. So there's an economic value creation as well. And now we're trying to see how we can actually combine these two initiatives, that what we are doing and what Samohika Shakti is already doing. So there's a lot that we can talk about. I can put in my email ID, please, or my phone number, and we can have a conversation.
So Venkat, incidentally, we have a large initiative on waste, textile waste upcycling.
Lovely.
So we have about 100 odd women where we use this textile waste, and they using looms, they convert that into mats, which are again put back into the community. So society community. Yeah. So
I definitely have your email ID, so we'll definitely have a
absolutely.
conversation. Sorry.
Is there a database of some kind? Is where innovations, etc., can be cataloged and people can not just textiles, but in general for the whole circularity concept, even in this country, is there a database, or can a database be created so people
Yes
like
and
you
no.
who have solutions put them up so that it's accessible to a wider community?
Yes and no. Yes, because we do have a database of a large number of solutions and innovators that we've come across and worked with in the last 4.5, 5 years. That's an internal facing database, unfortunately. But when we started off, so if you go to the CIF website, it's called circularapparel.co. You have to register for it, but once you register, it was intended or designed to be a platform where a database is actually available. And we wanted to actually, so connecting back to Shakti's question, I think the easiest way to make this conversation, get traction is how do you democratize learning?
Yeah.
Because while you wonder if there's actually anything happening and how complex and how large this problem is, the honest answer is there's a lot of interesting stuff that's already happening.
Yeah, but how do you find it? How much time?
So how do you find it, and how can you learn from somebody else's experience? So one of the things, especially when you're working with the private sector, one of the challenges, of course, is a lot of brands who are doing excellent work, but they're not sharing their learnings.
Yeah.
So our promise to the industry and to the brands is that I might not share who you are, but for every single activity, we actually make sure that the learnings are brought back into the industry. So we want to democratize learning around circular economy, but that's a work in progress on
Fair
the
enough, yeah.
knowledge
Whether
base
it's
being
linked into a
accessible.
CRI or linked into a,
Yes, but
PTA or linked whether, so that there's a general database for that industry.
absolutely. But there are what we can still do, like we do that internally as well, is we know of a few resources. If you just go and search them, or if you Google them, or if you follow them on LinkedIn, you'll already have thousands and thousands of players that you can reach in a matter of seconds.
Well, we are already over time now, and I don't want to be the last voice between your Friday evening. But it's even more difficult for me to summarize this now, because one, how can I do it first? And second, you know what, how can I use the minimum words to actually create a construct or a action plan for the next of this evolution of the dialogues that we have done. I would just like to use 4 words and leave all of you online who have joined us and all of you on the in person with us. You know, I think with all of this, we have been discussed in different areas, different fields, I think there is a whole lot of need of a education process, a new education process that will create more education about this whole gamut of different activities that are happening. And there needs to be more experience work that needs to happen and learn from what is happening in different parts of the world and bring it into the localized context. And then I think the third most important aspect which is required is the exposure, because one, we talk about communities, we talk about jobs, we talk about different sectors coming together, but still the exposure is not there to the every stakeholder who is part of it. And ultimately for that, we need to create a space where it can be exercised. So I think that's the 4 E's for me to sum this very interesting, but still very challenging. But yes, for sure, Bixara Global has a plan, has a vision, has an approach, and with all of you will able to bring it to the next level of the step after one. And I just like to end, Shakti, with my love, with just one thing, that this coming together is just the beginning for us. If we stay together like this, it will be progress. But if we end up working together, then only it will be success. So with this, I would like to end closure. Thank you everyone who have joined online, and Shakti to you for last closing comments. Thank you. Sure. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarika. Thank you, Ajay. Pleasure, Venkat.
Always. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Yash, and big thanks to all our panelists who, you know, engaged in this conversation. Very interesting and extremely insightful. Thank you to each one of you, and thank you to all our participants who are here with us today, and for those who attended the day 1 of our summit. As I mentioned to you before, this has just been our first attempt at the India Circularity Summit. It's the first India Circularity Summit. We plan to have this as an annual feature. And we know that this whole movement is it's in a fairly embryonic stage. But I'd like you to all stay tuned, because over the next few years, we are going to try and build this up. And we look forward to seeing you year after year for this summit. Just before I close the summit, I just wanted to share one insight with you, and this has got to do with one of my favorite authors, Fritz Schumacher, E.F. Schumacher, who wrote a book in 1973, which is called Small is Beautiful. I'm going back to you almost 50 years in time, and he spoke about, planet Earth and about, the natural capital that our planet has. And the book is extremely eloquent. It is, if you read that book, you will understand circularity in totality, because it's bringing It's really circularity is at the intersection of it's at the intersection of economics, environment and ecology and education, all of that bringing together. But what he spoke about, the one thing that he spoke of was, which I found really very striking, was that this is all the resources that we have on planet Earth are really like our capital. Yeah, think of it if you were running a company. Would you just fritter away your capital? Would you allow your capital to get eroded? Or would you not want to preserve your capital? So if we start thinking of planetary terms, the need of the hour today is to think on those lines. When we speak about finance, very often, more often than not, we only focused on our costs. Yeah, the cost that belongs to my unit, and that cost is very often just seen, more often than not, seen in just in financial terms. But are we not externalizing costs? Is anybody thinking about those costs that get externalized, and how do we build that into a sound business model? Yeah, this is going to be one of the big challenges of our time, and you will hear more of this year on year as we go along on this journey. So once again, I want to thank Avishkar Group for all of you for having allowed us to use your premises here today, for your participation in this event. A big thank you to the group and to all our panelists, our speakers, to all our participants and attendees for the summit. Our best wishes from all of you, from all of us, and stay well and stay safe. And we will see you next year sometime. Do stay in touch. We'll keep you posted. Thank you and bye for now.